Welcome back to the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Watkins. He's the coach, Phillip Roybal. And please welcome our guests, Ty Hayes from Around the Table Sports and J.J. Kitchen from Talking College Football with J.J. Kitchen. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. How's everybody tonight?
Doing fantastic, man. I'll tell you what, it's a pleasure to be on, to say the least. Your show, tell you what, I've been watching it. Just in general, the content you guys put out is really good, but it's factual stuff. And it's always a pleasure to be on here.
Hey, well, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on. This is the first time for JJ, but it definitely won't be the last. Ty, I believe you're muted, but let us know what you think about it.
I am muted. I'm sorry. I muted myself for the intro because I went to take a drink of Coke, and I'm notorious for accidentally coughing, drinking any sort of liquid. Man, I'm always happy to be here. It's always a great time. Not the first time. Hope it's not the last time. But
definitely not the last time either. No. We enjoy having you guys on. This is one of the things that me and Coach talk about a lot. That one of our favorite parts of doing the show is getting to talk to other really good creators. That's important to us. And you guys are definitely right at the top of the list for me. We're going to talk about a few things tonight. Folks, welcome to the show. Everybody in the comment section, our normals. Yeah, I know, under 739. We went way under that, bro. This isn't Ty
Thrice, give them some credit, Thrice. This is I'm the wild card here, right?
Oh man, I love it. And then we already got somebody talking to you. Check out the Peyton Kirkland's interview on the bench.
Truth is a Texas fan, phenomenal Texas fan. Comments on everything and will engage in scheme talk. I mean, is really interesting in having football conversations or debates, which is awesome.
Right on. Yes, and I'm glad that the mic is better tonight. Cracker, my fault on that last night. I dropped the ball.
That's automatic. But the thing is, and Jason, I've had players played at OU that played for me. So if they played at one of those schools, I'm damn sure going to like them.
Yes, sir. Now, next thing up on the list here, let's get back into these banners here. And this is another big thing. This is something I had saw last week on that SEC podcast, another channel I just love to watch. These guys, they're a trip. And these big orange walks or whatever he's calling them. Oh, dude, it's been great. But they've been talking a lot about now. There's this debate out there. I think everybody that's been looking towards the SEC for 2024, particularly OU and Texas move into the league. Now the expectation was, Ty, 6-3-3 format. You get 3 permanent rivals. And then, obviously you got 6 that rotate every year as far as every other year. This is going to allow you to play every team inside of a 2-year period, and you will have been at every stadium inside of a 4-year period. Gone is a lot of these by doing it with a 9-game schedule. Obviously, that's a 9-game schedule in the conference, which is a change. But I think that the main thing that a lot of people loved about this was the fact that you have the ability to see more of these matchups more often, where you've got somebody like A&M, you've got A&M that's they've played a bunch of South Carolina games, but they've only played Georgia once, and so there's a lot of these things that haven't happened. But now they're talking about sticking at 8 games, only having 1 permanent rival. Now it would still rotate to where you would play every 2 years and you would still be in the stadiums. But tell me what you think about this, because you're looking at some major rivalries going by the wayside on a year-to-year basis. My personal feeling is this is not good for the league. And I understand what they may be doing here, but I want to hear what you have to say about it first.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think that I like the 3. I like the 9 conference games, the 3 permanent rivals. But if you must not do that, you have to have 2 permanent rivals. And I'm saying this as an Alabama fan. You're not going to convince me. I know I joked earlier about kicking Auburn out the SEC, and I'm not joking about that. That's very serious. But at the same time, that's a great rivalry. Not only as an Alabama fan, not as an Auburn fan, which I'm absolutely not. I don't know that they exist. I've heard of them, but I've also heard of elves, and I haven't seen one of those either. So we'll find out.
Well, you hadn't been in New Mexico then.
Yeah, good point. But no, in all seriousness, like, I don't want that game taken away. I love looking forward to the Iron Bowl. I don't want the Tennessee game taken away. I love looking forward to that. Now, I know that Nick Saban had voiced some objectivity to this 3 permanent structure. Now, that's interesting because he's been a constant proponent of moving to the 9-game SEC structure. And then this year, all of a sudden, he's almost talking against it. And I'm going to tell you why. Because it's Nick Saban's job not to politic for the SEC, not to politic for college football, but to politic for Alabama.
That's right.
The 3 teams they gave Bama as rivals. Look, I'm down with it. Playing LSU every year, to me, I don't see why that's necessarily a net negative, considering they've played LSU every year forever, right? So it's like, okay, that's the status quo. But if I'm putting myself in Nick Saban's shoes and I'm looking across the board and one team has Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Missouri as their permanent 3, and then Bama gets Auburn, who, if Hugh Freeze turns them around, they have the ability to be good. They have Tennessee. If Hupel gets them going, they have the ability to get good. And LSU is here with Brian Kelly. Let's be very honest about that. I'm very excited to see them. The argument, from how I understand it, is... James, that doesn't count. Like I said, elves aren't real. The argument, as I understand it, is that they want to switch LSU with Mississippi State, is what Nick Saban is wanting to do. The argument for that is technically Mississippi State has been a longer rival, which, cool, I guess. But I don't know. Personally, man, I like the LSU game. I really think that's a good matchup, but I can understand Nick Saban not. But I'm personally, I like the 9 structure, the 6-3-3. I'm for that.
Good. And now, obviously, I wanted to kind of do that with talking between us first, because of the fact that we're kind of SEC guys, or going to be SEC guys. But I definitely wanted to get the perspective of 2 guys who are fans of non-SEC schools. And, JJ, let me start with you here. As you look at it, I mean, you have to assume that the SEC is going to continue to dominate the spots in this expanded playoff. You just made it a better league by adding Oklahoma and Texas. You have to expect that with the more and with the Pac-12 likely over with, you're going to see more teams going in from the SEC. Does it bother you as an ACC guy to have them possibly not playing, you're continuing to play like what I call those sisters of the poor games? I can't stand the Citadel game at the end of the year. I just don't like it. And Ty may not agree with me on some of that part of it, but that's, to me, I feel like add that other game, get rid of that one, so that we can see the best games. I think you're going to lose some of these rivalries, as Ty said too, which is not good for college football. The one thing that it's on is the one thing that we've talked about a lot is rivalries drive the sport.
Amen. And I think that a lot of people really forget that. College football is really based off of the rivalries. Okay. Right. Now, looking at it from a double-edged sword. Okay. As a fan, you want those 9 games because you watch the best of the best go at it week after week. But Ty, as you mentioned it, Nick Saban's job isn't to promote the SEC. It's not to promote the lifeblood of college football. It's to say, how can I get to 12 wins this year and get to the college football playoff?
Exactly.
And I think, and there's a double-edged sword. I'm going to go into a little bit of both. One, Nick Saban is to get 12-0 and get to the college football playoff. Number 2, those smaller schools, even though we might hate it, preferably, I think it's boring the first couple. It's just the ACC sometimes in general. Now, Pitt does a little bit of different. We have the backyard brawl with West Virginia. We have Cincinnati. Pitt's notoriously, and then we have Notre Dame. We got Notre Dame and South Bend. Notoriously, Pitt does bring on a lot of really good non-con games. They've been, we had Tennessee last year when we were down in Neyland Stadium. They came up here to Acrisure Stadium. So Pitt usually brings on tougher opponents, and which has actually been phenomenal in terms of actually bringing viewership. But when you look at it, a lot of these smaller universities, they do rely on this money. Okay. There's a lot of times that these checks get stroked to these schools, and that, whether it's $800,000 or $1 million, I think that kind of stuff does matter going to those schools. But the largest thing too is, we're still in a time period where the records mean everything. One loss could mean the difference of, okay, so are we going to go with an SEC school? Are we going to go with a Big Ten school? Or are we going to look at one of those ACC or the Big 12 schools? They're looking at ways to put the most wins on the schedule as they possibly can. For the fan, we want those 9 games. As an administrator, as a coach, they're probably saying, hey, I know Nick Saban. He's looking at it saying, look, I'd love to face those teams, but I want to make sure I'm putting my team in the best possible chance to get to the college football playoff, and that's by 8 games. Me personally, one way or the other, I really don't care because the ACC is right now at 8 games. Now, we do have 3 conference opponents, 3 opponents that are, regardless for the next 2 years, will be constant rivals or teams that we face no matter what. And then we'll face numerous teams in the conference. We'll face everybody in those 3 years. But I think in general, the college football fan wants to see those big-time rivalries, wants to see those big-time games. I think Tennessee and Alabama is a game that has got to be played. Obviously, Auburn and Alabama will always be played. There'll never be a question if that's going to be played or not. It's a huge rivalry game. In my opinion, I really put that in terms of, down south, it's Auburn, Alabama. Up north, it's Michigan, Ohio State. Those are the 2 really big rivalries that I look at outside of, obviously, the backyard brawl in Pitt and West Virginia. But when you look at those, it's just you got to really bring back in the rivalries. And I think that's why in conference realignment, we're shifting away from the markets and starting to say, okay, where can we get the most viewership if we're going to add teams to each one of these conferences? Or where are we going to look to when we go to expand? Me personally, I think Greg Sankey is the best commissioner in college football. He understands the culture of the SEC. He understands the brands that he wants in there. He's not going to make moves. I loved how he threw a shot at the Big Ten and said, we didn't go out there and just bring away rivalries by bringing USC and UCLA in. We brought in Texas and Oklahoma, which Texas and Oklahoma obviously are rivalries. But guess what? You've also added Texas and Texas A&M. You've now renewed a rivalry. He understands the basics of, okay, where am I going to get the most viewership from? And I think that's why he understands with what he's doing, what he's working with. He talked about recently, we're not looking to add a numerous amount of teams like some of these other conferences. And I think that's why the SEC is in such great shape. It might be real top heavy in terms of Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. You're going to bring in now Texas and Oklahoma, but they understand their brand. That's why the SEC is so perfect for college football. While the Big Ten doesn't understand where they're trying to bring in different markets and stuff like that, which can be beneficial, but it's rivalries. And the SEC has done that for years now, and that's why they're number 1.
Muted, Jason.
Muted.
Just saying, great statement. Yeah. Loved it. No, Coach, tell us what you think about this. Now, this is obviously the poll that I put up there today on Twitter. As of right now, there's only 53 votes on it. We'll update it as we go along. But 60% of people would be disappointed if they don't adopt this 6-3-3 schedule that allows it. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that if you only have one rival that's permanent every year, you also lose. I mean, we didn't really say anything about it, but you have to assume that the cocktail party is going to happen. So now you just lost the oldest rivalry in the South in Auburn and Georgia, right? And mind you, Tennessee and Bama not playing. Now, who's Tennessee going to be playing every year? Vandy. Is this even equitable? So to me, I mean, it's not like they're fixing it to be equitable. And if that's the argument that any coach is having about equity, this is not the format that's going to fix that.
Yeah, if I could jump in, the only point I would make, and I do want to, Frightening says, give it 5 years, Ty. Our schedule is more of a nightmare than yours. Speaking as a Texas fan with the 3 permanent rivals, I hear you with OU. I grant you that one. I don't know if I can say that A&M is a bigger threat than Tennessee, Auburn, or LSU. But I also don't believe A&M is going to do anything. Whereas when you look at the 3 permanent rivals Alabama has, 2 of them have won a national championship since 2010.
Right.
Yeah.
There's not a rival Texas is playing that's made a college football playoff game and won. Right. So I hear you, but like, I might take that bet. But I don't have a nice house, so I hope you don't have a nice house either. I might get real fleeced. No, but I hear you, Truth. But they've had money for how long? Money didn't just magically appear at A&M. Did money just magically appear there yesterday? Or has it been there for years? It's been there for years and they've underachieved. We've seen money means nothing. Texas is richer than God himself. You'll have a playoff win.
Yeah, listen. Yeah, I mean, and with the Longhorn Network, don't give me A&M here. Don't give me A&M here because with the Longhorn Network, you guys made what, an extra $450 million?
Yeah, we've seen teams with money get the best talent with their money and then squander it. Money is only good if you use it right, and I haven't been shown that any of those institutions outside of Texas uses money right.
Yeah,
so,
and it's kind of funny you bring that up because honestly, a really good friend of mine, Brendan Marion, was the wide receiver coach down at Texas this past year. I can tell you this from learning within some of these programs, okay, and I think it's why they struggle so much. The boosters got to get out of the way. You need to let these administrators, the coaches, do what they want to do. And I think a lot of fans, for the fans that are out there that don't know this, the head football coach of your favorite school does more than just coach football. I think the coaching football is maybe like 10% of what that guy does in a day. There's so much politics. There's so much talking to boosters. What's going on? I'll give you more money if you do this. Here's a favor for me. There's a favor for you. It's a crazy circumstance to say the least. And these guys need to be CEOs wherever they go. And to tie to your point, we've seen how many teams with all this money that don't win the national title because you have guys left and right pulling each other. I think LSU went through that for a while. Now, obviously, if you have the right guy in there, that it really circumstances saying, hey, we're not going to let the boosters get involved too much or the alumni allowing to run our team, LSU should be in contention for a national title every year. I think, Ed Orgeron won it, but he let the alumni base, he let the boosters all control him, and then it just spiraled out of control, and then look what happened. He went down and burned in flames. They need guys, strong guys that go in there and say, look, I'm going to do it my way, or guess what? I'm not going to be here very long. It's my way or the highway. And you need to control those people along with using the money correctly, and things can happen. I think Texas A&M is a prime example of money that's just being spent, getting talent, but just not developing. I think Jimbo Fisher really needs to start putting stuff together, or he's going to be looking for another job. That long-term contract.
They got to pay him a lot of money to make him look for another job. And
not only that, but we talked about this in my show. It's just like in the NFL. Think about this, JJ. Whenever Aaron Rodgers signs a contract, he set the market. Well, Jimbo Fisher has now set the market at X amount of dollars per year to give you 8 and 4. So if they fire Jimbo Fisher and the argument is we need a better coach, that coach isn't going to take Jimbo's deal because he says, well, I'm going to give you better, therefore you must pay me better. Yeah. I don't know what the hell they were thinking when they signed that contract. It makes no sense to me. Now, Truth, I do hear you. Like, I grant you OU because I think they're going in the wrong direction. And I grant you Texas. I think Texas is moving in the right direction with your staff. But A&M is where, like, I disagree because you say if they get the right guy, A&M didn't just come into money. To me, this conversation we're having is just like this. Is the sun more likely to rise tomorrow or not rise tomorrow? It's much more likely to rise tomorrow. Why? Yeah. Because it rose yesterday. It rose the day before yesterday. If I've seen A&M suck, regardless of having money for 100 years, it's illogical to say, oh, well, tomorrow it's going to be fixed when LSU has been better. Like it's just counter to logic. It's just like saying the sun's more likely not to rise tomorrow, in my opinion, because we've seen A&M underachieve.
Yeah.
No Texas A&M slander. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, we got a TAMU fan in here. Peanut Butter Hero. Are you a Texas A&M guy? This is probably not the place for you.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. Now, obviously, I'm sorry about the Texas A&M. It's not going to get any better anytime soon. He's going to be fishing. That's what he's going to be doing instead of coaching football. But what I can tell you is this: I think Texas, believe it or not, I think I'm really giving him like 50%. It can go either way with Sarkisian. I think he's done good in some places. He's done bad in some places. And I think he needs to figure out what he needs to do. He's got the roster to do it, but now he needs to actually win. When it comes to Brent Venables at OU, I've watched that guy consistently. I like him a lot. I think he's just a great fit for Oklahoma and their culture. I think he needs just a little bit of time to really revamp what Lincoln Riley really kind of just separated a little bit. Let him do his own thing. Things take time. I think people want the results now instead of waiting. But I think just in general, when you look at those schools, where it goes, it's going to be a really interesting dynamic of where it goes from here. But in terms, I've been watching Texas since I was a kid. It's amazing to me how much they've faltered year after year after year with the money that goes flowing through there. And it's the oil money that goes through there, and it's never going to end. They have endless amounts of money, and for some reason, they just can't get it right. And I know it's the boosters and what's going on and who's pulling who and the strings pulling where, but I'm just really enticed to see as they enter the SEC, a much tougher schedule than what's being portrayed in the Big 12. I just can't wait to see what these schools do as they enter the SEC. I just think it's going to be one for matchups for fans. It's going to be really cool to watch. Obviously, Texas almost beat Alabama last year, but Alabama pulled away because they had more veteran guys and they had the veteran coaching. You're just going to start to see that kind of stuff.
And Sark has a really hard time making adjustments. Now, frightening truth. You're talking about the possibility of Jimbo being gone. I would ask you, what happens if Sark doesn't win 10 like he's never done, and he doesn't get to that conference championship in his last year as a Big 12 school? To me, we've seen it before. This could easily be, Sark's last year.
I'll tell you what, it's kind of like the end of a shrimp tail. It's getting thrown away. So, I mean, he's kind of at the end of his reign for sure. He needs to start producing results. At a place like Texas, they don't wait. And you could tell them to wait. But now when I look at this team, to be quite honest with you, I can totally understand at this point. One, I will say this right now. If Texas does not win the Big 12 this year, there's problems there because you have the roster, you have the talent. He pulled Kyle Flood from Alabama. I mean, he has the staff and everything. If you don't win now this year, you got to start wondering about a fit. And I think that now you can really, by year 3, you really start having that conversation about is he the right guy or not. Just my personal opinion on the matter.
I've always said 3 years for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I still kind of feel that way as well. This is where I've been, saying quite a bit lately that, we've seen, and I mean, it happens other places too. LSU isn't known to not have a quick hook. Even Oklahoma. I mean, there's a lot of fans in this Oklahoma fan base that were calling for BV's head after that 3-game losing streak, or even really after the second loss. So, I mean, it happens. It does happen. Simmered down pit guy, he says. Oh, we like this dude already, even though he is a UT fan. But I will throw this down real quick. Listen, bottom line, what I would say to this whole thing is that my thing is this: when you and Coach, I'm going to pass it to you because you haven't chimed in yet. We talked about this a few minutes ago, though, before the show, and we were saying, look, when it came to, these guys are getting billions of dollars on this new contract, and this is now about the fan bases. Now, I know that they want you to win. But give me a break, man. I want to see these great matchups every year. I don't want to see less of them. I don't want to see them every other year. It's been 10 years since I've seen an A&M Texas game. And I don't, even as an OU fan, I want to watch that game again every year. Coach?
Well, again, as a coach and as a fan, I want rivalry games. Give me, it's kind of like, I don't know. I've never had cocaine or anything like that, but I guess it's be kind of like a cocaine rush or something. I don't know, a high, but I'm just telling you, we live for that. That's what really gets your adrenaline flowing. You think about it as a fan, just sitting in front of the TV in your own home, but hell, you've got one of those great games going on, and boy, you're into it just sitting there by yourself at home.
Yeah.
And so those matchups need to continue to happen, as many as you can have possible. Obviously, being a Notre Dame fan, we don't have a lot of those types of games. We have a few, but obviously we love Caleb Williams and USC. But there's some matchups like that. But going back to talk about something else, guys, the Sarkisian at Texas, guys, he's got to prove it. He's got to prove something. He hadn't pissed a drop, and I'm not a Sarkisian fan. I'm not a Texas A&M fan from the perspective of Jimbo Fisher. To me, a guy that stabs Bobby Bowden in the back to get the head coaching job, I'm not much of a fan of, and I wish him the least success of any coach in college football. But again, pouring money, good money after bad money, and that's what those guys are doing. And money's not always the answer. And y'all have already said that. And, I tell you what, I am excited a little bit, although I'm not the biggest fan of our LSU coach. Obviously, he came from our house, and his dancing, his Cajun dancing and his Cajun speak aren't very, very good. But I will say this. I think that they made a great decision in hiring him.
I think they did too.
When he came to Notre Dame, we were awful. And we had hit the bottom of the well, and he pulled us out of there and won games, brought us back to winning again. And but I think they made a good choice. I think we're going to see LSU win, moving down the road here. But that's kind of my thoughts, guys.
If I may, Truth, I love you, but this is something where I think your argument is so clouded and biased right now. It's a little wild. You say recruiting will do all, and I've talked about the lack of cohesion with Texas recruiting, but the Big 12 has been terrible. Terrible for years. Don't believe me? The NFL has turned their nose to the Big 12 because why? We had RJ in the channel talking about the differences, and he explained it to us. I don't need to pontificate. I can get Denzello in here to explain. We can do it. We can do it. Texas was the number one recruiting class in 2015, 2016, number 2 in 2017 in the Big 12, number 1 in 2018, number 1 in 2019, number 1 in 2020, number 2 in 2021. 2 years since 2015, they haven't had the number 1 recruiting class in the Big 12. How many times have they won the Big 12 since 2015? If it's that easy, if talent is just going to do it, I hear you.
It should have already happened,
If your logic was as linear as you say, the sun wouldn't have rose yesterday. Jimbo, because you said, oh, well, if Jimbo does bad, they'll just fire him. That's what they said when Kevin Sumlin got out of there. And then they got Jimbo. And that's what they said to the guy before Kevin Sumlin and the guy before that and I can go back 100 years. At one point, we got to start looking at trends and say, maybe the sun will rise tomorrow because it's much more likely that that's the reality of their situation. Now, I'm not talking about Texas. I do agree with you. Texas is going places, but I do think it's a massive oversimplification to say, hey, think about us as Georgia. I hear you, but Georgia didn't have the resources. And bro, we still had not enough OLL to run a second team last year. I hear you. Sure. But the Big 12 as a whole was devoid of talent. Like I just said, the NFL turned their nose to it. So you had a league devoid of talent and a team that did have
say what
talent.
you want to say about the last coach, but he beat Oklahoma and he won, and he was in a conference championship game too.
Tom Herman should have never been fired to begin with, and just in my opinion,
Amen.
I know that Texas fans hate to hear this. They hate to hear this.
I will disagree with you there. I think he should have been because of the lack of cohesion in recruiting, and I think it was just kind of being a cogwheel going in circles. But I'm making a larger argument, Truth, no doubt about it, because you do know I'm very excited about the future that Texas has, but I also think you're making an oversimplification of the issue that talent will solve everything or money will solve everything. And my point to you is there's no logic to that point. I've given you countless examples, and you're countering me, but by examples in theory, where I'm giving you practical examples where, yeah, you can tell me A&M is top 5 in spending, OU is top 5 in spending, Texas is top 5 in spending.
That's right.
Auburn won a national championship more recently than y'all did. LSU did. So spending isn't really equating national championship wins because them top 5 teams aren't exactly taking home that hardware.
Nope.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I just, I understand that the Sark hike because of coming from Alabama in the OC position and what he did there, and he was really good. But you got to look at both records and what Tom Herman did. If you look at what Tom Herman did to what Steve Sarkisian has done, did even Tom Herman have a losing season at Texas? Sark did that right away. I don't know. I think when you look at it, I think people give Tom Herman too much of a harp. If you got to realize too, he did a hell of a job at Houston. What he did at Houston.
Texas hat right now.
Yeah, it's
better not.
When you look at it, you look at Texas. They have all the facilities. I mean, growing up, I'm that kid. Back when Vince Young was facing USC in the national title game, I sat up for that game. I went to school the next day, and I probably slept for the first 5 periods, but it's okay. I watched that game. I remember the days when Mac Brown was there, and then by the time they pushed him out and they said it was enough. When you look at it, what Tom Herman did, guys, I'm telling you, man, he shouldn't have lost his job. I'm sorry.
Here's where I disagree. They'd recruited less offensive linemen than Vanderbilt. Tom Herman had completely disregarded the offensive line, didn't even do anything with it, and never did anything. When Sark first got there, they didn't have a guy drafted. So there was talent, but not there. And Truth, same with Bama. Y'all were terrible for a decade. I gave you 100 years and you're giving me decades. Once again, my brother in Christ, you got to give me something tangible. I have given you tangible examples and you're giving me a theoretical. That's not how debates work, my brother in Christ. A&M.
A brother in Christ. That has not been used on this show.
But here's my point. He says it's an advantage. Eventually it will add up. Isn't it just as logical that someone in the 1930s said that about A&M? Oh, we got all this money. It'll add up. And then they said it in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s.
To be fair, this is like an Okie Light fan that says that they're better than Oklahoma and they haven't done crap. So this is exactly where we are with this. If you're talking Texas and Alabama, we're not having a real conversation.
Sure, but Truth, this is the reality of the situation. And if you're saying that this hasn't always happened, then you're not being honest with yourself. Teams, you don't think Texas has been throwing money at players? You don't think Bama's been throwing money at? You don't think these colleges have been now we're being facetious. This has been happening behind closed doors. What you're not doing is saying the problems that money can now have, i.e. A&M. Didn't they just have a massive problem with culture because of the money? You're taking one stance.
Yeah, it's not just about money, guys.
Nuance.
It's not just about money. And I think that
this is the national debater in me because I was a debater at the national level, CX in high school and in college. And this example is completely eliminating all nuance. And it's not It's not even one that really needs to continue going because you're taking one example saying, I don't care about any of the nuance or any of the facts because I think it'll work this way. Even though it has never worked this way, it'll happen. That's not how structured conversations can work. That's why I disagree with you about A&M, because you can say, sure, but openly, that just happened, and that locker room burned. They had a coach.
It blew up, and they've lost more guys over it than they got back. This is not a sustainable model, and this is where I'm at on this. This is not a sustainable model.
Get it.
The NIL money is never going to be the only thing that matters. This is why I've tried to tell Oklahoma fans that over this whole Zadavian Sims deal that, listen, if they didn't dump that money on him, it's because they've got 6 other guys that will be just as good or better. Now, do they need to get those guys? Absolutely. They do need to do it. But they're not recruiting just by using NIL money. This is not what Venables is going to do. It's a relationship thing. They want to build and make sure that you don't have a bunch of drama so that you don't end up with that kind of crap that you got at Texas A&M last season. And what you still kind of have, even among the coaching staff this season. They're not recruiting based on who's a good fit. They're recruiting based on the fact that they have more money to dump in the pockets of everybody that they want to. And there are those certain kids that are absolutely going to take the money.
Here's one thing I'll say, Ran, you're right. Alabama is spending, but now you're almost doing what Truth is doing, and you're taking this conversation, eliminating all the nuance involved and hanging on to one point that completely restructures this. My whole point is money alone is not going to give you anything. Alabama has put out more first-round draft picks in the Nick Saban era than the whole Big 12 in that same time frame. So development happened. Now, I'm not saying it was all just that, but my point is to me, Truth, I hear you. Eventually it will even out. But to me, it's just as logical to say if teams like A&M continue not developing, why is a player going to be inclined to go there when he realizes I might be able to get $100,000 less a year, but when I make it to the NFL, I'm going to get $20 million in guaranteed money? That's right. It's just as logical for me to say that as it is for you to say, oh, well, the biggest wallet will win. If they're not developing you, NIL is funny money compared to
Since when is it? That hasn't been the case because Alabama doesn't have the biggest wallet.
Yeah.
They have one of them.
Yeah. And I think that's the crazy part too, when you look at this from a perspective of when you look at these schools
but they're not equal.
Yeah. And I've had this conversation with parents in terms of the recruiting process. I've done numerous speaking engagements in terms of this. One day, I really do hope that the parents, because it's just as bad, the parents and the kids understand that it's not just about the NIL money. You got to go to a place where 1, you're wanted, 2, you're going to get developed, 3, you're going to play, and then 4, you finally understand the NIL money. Because guess what? If you want to go make NIL money, I understand it. That's perfect. Go ahead and make your money, whatever you want to do. But like what Ty was saying, the NIL money is peanuts compared to what the NFL is offering. You got to go to a place where you're going to get developed. You got to go to a place where you're going to play. If you're going to sit there for 3 years, I'm sorry, the NFL doesn't count stats on the bench. It just doesn't work that way. So you need to get on the field at a place where they're going to take care of you, and then take into account the NIL money.
Ran, we're talking specifically.
We're not saying that at all.
Ran, I don't think I'm not trying to be mean, but you're having a totally different conversation than the one we're having. We're saying specifically, Truth is claiming that everything in college football is equal and money will equate. And if everything is equal, I agree, Truth. The problem is it's not. And I'll put it like this. Bama
coaches aren't equal.
But
come on, man.
Coaches aren't equal. If we look at historically, Bama put out more offensive players in one draft of the first round than Texas put out since Vince Young. So I get you. If all else is equal, that's a massive theory. Like we can't just solve for college football like we can solve for an equation because there are invariable pieces. So saying all else equal is to completely ignore the facts. Unless I'm massively misunderstanding what you're saying, that's just like saying, we can go swimming every day because it will be 85, guaranteed.
Guys, think about this real quick. If money was all it took, the Yankees would never lose. They would never lose. And really, they don't win that very often. They don't.
Yeah.
Truth, from a debater's standpoint, I am going to let you know it's not a very good point to argue. I'm just because it's counter to everything we've seen. It's counter to other sports, and I hear you. But now we're trying to equal. Money is good. No, you're literally.
I'm not saying that money doesn't matter. I'm not saying that money doesn't matter.
I don't think what I'm telling you is because it keeps coming back to them saying, "Oh, well, you're saying money isn't good." That's not the point.
No,
you're saying if everything is equal.
It's not that we don't want to see the kids get paid either. I don't think that that's even part of it. And that's the thing that where I'm at is I want to see these kids get paid. I think that they've been getting paid for a long time. I'm glad that it's finally out in the open. There's less sneaking around about it. I think the NCAA has no teeth because all of these rules that keep piling up that are still not changing the transfer portal or anything else. That has or not being able to use money as an enticement. We know that's bullshit. I mean, the bottom line is, but I'm not going to blame this on the kids. I'm blaming this on adults.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I'm blaming this on adults. The way that things are going, this is that way. But if we're going to sit here and talk about money, listen, the Yankees win once every maybe 10 years and really not that much. And if you go all the way back to the 70s, they had the most money and they didn't win shit then either. The bottom line is it's not just money. It's never going to be about that. You have to build for your team and what you're trying to do. And if you're going after just the best player, it doesn't always work, guys. It just doesn't.
Hey, Jason, are the Yankees out of Oklahoma?
No, in truth, it's all good because this is a great conversation to have here, right? This is literally two different thought processes in college football. And I hear you. Money is great, but development is still king. And unless you can equalize for development, and I get you, you say, oh, well, everything equalizes. The problem is it doesn't equalize. It doesn't. Oh, like teams, A&M has
the Astros have freaking won more than the Yankees have in the last freaking 15, 20 years.
Yeah, so it's an interesting conversation to have. I get your point, but like you can't just say, oh, well, everything is equal. That's like waving your wand and making everything in a manner that it isn't. That's where we disagree, is saying if everything else is equal, that's a massive step that's just not rooted in reality.
Yeah, we're gonna move past this, but in the end, and we got way off a track of what we were talking about. I think that in the end, what we're the main question was this, and I want to just go around quick. What is your thoughts? Yes or no? Should they go to 9 games? Should they go to 8? Go with Ty. You're on the screen. Go
9.
Okay.
9.
Coach.
12.
I love it. Coach saying all. And I'm going to say I want the 9 too. I want to see with this should be the trade-off for what we're having to see in realignment in college football and the inability to a lot of these teams to ever really have the real chance at getting there. Then I want to see the best teams play. I want to see them play every week. So to me, and even being a fan of a team that's about to be in the SEC, I want to see you play the best teams every week. I want to see Oklahoma playing Florida once a year, even in the way that they're talking about some of these mix-ups, or A&M again. This is what I want to see. I just feel like, and forget the money part of it and all that. But in the end, when you're making the money that the Big Ten and the SEC, and we didn't bring the Big Ten into this, but they've been doing a lot of the same stuff. If you're getting that kind of money, I want to see the best football week after week after week. Okay. So that's just where I'm at on too. All right. We are going to move on. And great lively discussion, folks. I really, really like that. I appreciate that. And nobody's mad about nothing in here.
No,
we always do this. We will sit here and have this conversation all day long because this is how we roll. But I love it. Folks, if you like the conversation yourself, make sure you hit that like button, share this with your friends. You can always hit that super chat heart and give us a little tip if you want to, or go to our podcast merchandise website. I'll throw that up on the screen in just a second. You can get your Horns Down shirts in there. You can get your Okie Light Can shirt in there as well. We got some funny ones in there. Go check it out as you get the opportunity as well. Now, JJ, coming to you. I was watching on TJ Pittenger's Double Frost No Slide. Love that show. Mm-hmm. He was talking about the unequal revenue in the ACC that was voted for. I think it ends up giving like 10 million more. You can correct me where I'm wrong on this. 10 million more or so if you make the playoff, that kind of stuff. That's going to be their unequal. I don't know that it keeps up with it. But did that vote, in your opinion, because he says no, he thinks that it didn't hurt. In fact, it helped. It didn't help. It hurt the ACC more or less. What is your feelings about that vote that happened at the meetings this past week or so, and what that means going forward? Does it extend the league out a little more? How quick do you see possibly anything that's going to be in terms of like lawsuits and stuff for the FSUs and Clemsons and Miami and Carolina to get out?
So here's the way I look at it. Okay. Me personally, Okay. I don't think it actually hurts, and I don't think it actually helps. Okay. I think it stays the same. And here's why. When you look at this conference, a lot of people don't understand in terms of, well, you know what, they're not making as much money as everybody else, or the gap is going to really just stretch out all the way out till 2030 or 2036 when it really does reach the end of its agreement. Do we get to 2036 when we're still in the same agreement? No, we're not. Okay, here's what I want people to understand. And I talked about this with a lot of Pac-12 fans, but I've learned Pac-12 fans don't exactly like facts. They just kind of like want to just live in their own world at this point. The ACC is in a completely different agenda than what the Pac-12 is. The ACC is locked into a deal that is airtight. I don't care what anybody else thinks. It's a fact. The only way that you look at the grant of rights is if you send your attorneys to Greensboro, North Carolina. That's the only way you're going to be able to view it. They've every school, like for instance, when Brett McMurphy, me personally, I do like Brett McMurphy when he reports most of the time. He's the one that made up the Magnificent Seven, all that good stuff. Here's what I can tell people. All 14 schools have sent an attorney to Greensboro, North Carolina.
Yes,
Everyone has looked at the grant of rights. What I can tell you is this. Me personally, the ESPN, what people don't understand is ESPN's pretty much given up on the Pac-12. Okay, they're willing to sacrifice the Pac-12. ESPN is a 50-50 partner in the ACC network. They're not going to devalue their own brand and their own network and lose money by allowing schools to leave. They allowed attorneys to build this thing, okay? It's airtight for a reason. Here's the one way that I think that it does help the ACC. One, I don't call it unequal revenue sharing because here's the thing. The media rights deal, the money is still the same. How I've been explained to this from the sources that I've talked to within the ACC and the commissioner's office, everything in between, is in reality, it's really $15 to $20 million a school could make more. Here's how. The NCAA tournament, bowl games, the college football playoff. Here's my way of looking at it. I totally understand the gripe that Clemson has. They've won the conference more times than not. They have produced the best. They have beaten the best. They have beaten
4 championship games. Yeah.
They've beaten the SEC. They've beaten the Big Ten. They've beaten the brakes off the Big Ten. Okay. I think the Big Ten's a little overrated.
Oh, yeah. That's Ohio State's big brother.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but to the Big Ten fans out there, the Big Ten can talk about being in the Power 2. It's really the Power 1 at this point if we really want to play that game. But in reality, when you look at this contract, nobody's going anywhere anytime soon. You might want your team to leave. Personally, I would like my team to go somewhere else. In a perfect world, maybe even the Big Ten, because we're here in Pennsylvania, whether it's even in that time period. Obviously, Coach, correct me if I'm wrong, Notre Dame has prided itself on being an independent university. It's been that way for years. It's not going anywhere. They'll get their money. And personally, I kind of like Notre Dame, how they don't really care about the actual totals and numbers and money because they'd rather care about tradition. Commissioner Jim Phillips of the ACC talked about that recently. Me personally, I like how I call it not unequal revenue sharing, but an incentive plan. The teams that do the best get the most money. That's common sense. I have no problem with that. In 2022, the tax return showed who got the most money in 2022? The University of Pittsburgh. Why? Because they entered the NCAA tournament and they won the ACC. I'm totally fine with that. On a regular year, I think Clemson probably gets the most money because between the NCAA tournament, the college football playoff, it makes the most sense. I like when teams get the most payout due to how you play on the field. Here's my gripe with FSU. I understand viewership and viewership is higher. But also, too, some of these schools, and it's not just, for instance, when Pitt faced Tennessee, we averaged 4.5 million fans for that game. When we faced in the backyard brawl with West Virginia, Pitt averaged 3.5 million viewers that game. But when you're on the ACC network, it's still building after that time period, okay? I think what the FSU fans need to understand is when you want your argument to be heard, I understand the viewership. I understand the brand. No one will ever question that. But here's what I can tell you. FSU needs to win more. FSU needs to be relevant more.
Yeah.
When you start having that conversation, it's a really hand-in-hand thing. The brand FSU will always be there. And it was built by Bobby Bowden. No matter what, it will never go away. He's the one that developed it. He'll always be the Hall of Fame coach, and he will always be the best coach that's ever been from Florida State. Florida State.
He's the one that built the family of Florida State. Absolutely.
Exactly. The culture, everything. No one will ever beat Bobby Bowden and what he built and what he really built Florida State to be. That's why the brand is so strong at Florida State. But these teams need to win more. Last year was a good start for FSU. I like what they did. I think more and more you're going to see how great FSU can be because now Norvell has got his footing done. He's now beginning to build it. But I think now with this unequal, for instance, or incentive plan, I call the incentive plan, you're going to see a lot more schools invest more. For instance, you see Wake Forest, they're a small school. They're the smallest Power 5 school in the conference, or even in Power 5. It's crazy how small of a school they are. They've invested over $200 million. Pitt, for instance, has put together almost $750 million in facility upgrades. Clemson is still at the top of the game. They're over $1 billion at this point. Okay, Florida State, now they're starting to add more. You're really kind of creating a culture to where if you want more money, you got to win. It's that simple. And I think it's the best way for the ACC to move forward. Will it create a gap space? Will it shorten the gap? No, it's not. It's not going to shorten the gap. But what I can tell people right now is nobody is going to leave the ACC until that one school wants to go to court, wants to pay all those fees. Because the minute, even if the ACC dissolves, we were all told that the ACC dissolves, hey, the conference breaks apart, it's done. But it's not. ESPN and the ACC can sue and create a lawsuit for each and every individual school. And right now, in reality, even if one school wanted to leave the ACC, it's between $420 million and $720 million.
That's right.
Those schools will not leave. The ESPN will not want that school to go to another conference to pay them more money right now. Oof. If I had to guess, you'll have a school or two challenge it in court, but in 2027 or 2028 when that goes down. And then you bring ESPN to the battling table and you figure out and you say, hey, the SEC is either going to accept me or the Big Ten is going to accept me, and you'll pay me more there. The choice is yours. And I think if I'm a betting man, the ACC is not going to want to lose its ass on the ACC network. They're going to pay more. It'll still be less than the Big Ten and the SEC, where it's notoriously been. But if the Big Ten if the Big 12 was able to get a competitive rate with the teams they have in that conference, the ACC has tremendous brands in their conference. They will certainly be able to compete, and I wouldn't be shocked if down the road we had a renegotiation.
Yeah, and that's listening to what TJ was saying on his show, just to kind of go through some of that. This is kind of some of the things he was talking about was, that this deal, it doesn't touch any of that media, and you brought that up. The media portion really doesn't get touched.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that they feel like that they could get a little more. Now, do I believe that FSU deserves a ton more than everybody else? Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I would tell you is, and I've said this before, I think I've said this to you, Ty. To me, you do need to make sure that you keep your power brands in that conference, and that includes North Carolina. And that even includes Miami in view of the fact that they haven't done anything. But we're talking about programs that can be relevant in like that, right? When you start looking at this, if you're ESPN, my question has been, you've got 12, 13 years left on this deal. And if your marquee programs are wanting out, and it's a possibility that they could sue and get out, and if they do that and you make them have to sue you, they're not going to the SEC. They're not going to go to the Big 12 for that matter. They're going to go to Fox and the Big 10, which is not a good look. And if you're ESPN right now, you own the state of Florida. You would lose that. Now, again, we're talking about we've said this a bunch. Rivalries run the game, but you cannot tell me that look, I don't want to see a college football world where FSU can't be relevant. Not that they aren't, that they can't. Yeah. Right. And I feel the same way about a lot of programs, but to me, it's just, I don't know. My question is, how do you let that go away if you're ESPN and not find a way to make these guys happy earlier than not? Right.
I would agree. And I think that's what it's going to come down to. And it's going to come down to ESPN figuring it out. And I think that the fact, when you look at this and you say, hey, ESPN, you have an option here. Okay, you've already decided that you're not going to partake into the Pac-12. So you're not going to use that money. Now that money is going to technically a little bit's going to go towards the NBA. They're going to deal with other networks and whatnot in terms of other sports. But the fact is, you want to keep these guys in conference. I completely agree. Like, for instance, when you look at the incentive plan that's personally there, or even if down the road, let's say in 2 years, they go to an unequal revenue sharing, a technically real unequal revenue sharing, where is Syracuse going to go? Where's Boston College going to go? Where's Wake Forest going to go? They're not going to ask to leave. They're in a Power 5 conference. They're not going anywhere. Please, the schools that are there. Personally, me, I really look at it as, UNC, in my opinion, is a bigger brand. Okay, it's a bigger brand in Miami.
Absolutely,
it's a bigger brand than Clemson. Okay, that's a major brand.
Right.
And I think when you look and it's again an arguable statement to say the least, but UNC's up there.
Well, it's Michael Jordan.
Yeah, it's the Jordan brand. I mean, it's there for a reason. But when you look at these schools, you want them to stay there. And I think that just in general, ESPN, from what I've been told too, ESPN cannot let this fail because of the 50-50 partnership. And that's the key within this whole thing. Right. ESPN is really intertwined itself in this conference to where I think there's a personal reason why they're letting the Pac-12 go. ESPN has been involved with the Pac-12 for decades. And the fact that they're now saying, you know what, we're going to back off. We're gonna let the CW or Ion Television or I don't even know what.
That's because they know it looks bad. Here's the thing, and you said this right earlier when they were talking about the fact that they don't want the blood of the Pac-12 on their hands, and the Big Ten doesn't want which that's hilarious to me that the Big Ten doesn't want the blood of the Pac-12 on its hands. They started the whole thing.
When they started,
yeah. But that being said, that's ESPN has never publicly come out and said that they're out of the negotiations. We keep hearing it from everywhere, and the Pac-12 fans can sit there and call Dennis Dodd a liar and all that all they want to, and all they do is make themselves look stupider every time they do that, by the way, because down the line it continues to become reality that this is what's going on. Everything that you're hearing out of him, Andrew Marchand, the guys from The Athletic, there's a bunch of them that are out there speaking the truth. Jim Williams, who's been on my show multiple times, you've been with him too. I know, these guys know what the hell they're talking about. Jim Williams has won 7 freaking Emmys for college football production.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
He's
incredible. These guys absolutely have real sources within these conferences saying real things. So, but aside from that, the difference is that there's no way for ESPN to get out of it. Now, right now, are they hurting financially? I guess so. They've had, and Disney's having some trouble too. So there's been a lot of layoffs and things like that. And do I blame them for wanting to keep it on the cheap? Of course. Yeah. I don't blame them for wanting to keep it cheap. They signed the deal. The ACC stupidly signed that deal, by the way. Mm-hmm. So, there is something to be said of that. And I think you said that before too, Ty. That's where I was going to come to you on it is, where do you feel about, in the end, again, coming from the SEC point of view of things, it's easy for you and I to say, hey, well, so what? Too bad for you, but in the greater interest of college football, don't you feel like ESPN has to do something here and do it correctly?
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's easy for me to sit here and almost have these guesses because I think in the era of like these TV media rights deals, you have to have an understanding that a decade, money changes so drastically in a decade.
Drastically. And
a great example.
All these other conferences are going to go back to renegotiation twice.
Yep.
Before this is over.
A great example of this, I think, is I've told you, Jason, I'm a big UFC fan, right?
Yeah.
But Dana White said something ridiculous the other day. I don't know if y'all saw it. It's when he was talking about his slap league. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. And he's like, we get more views than the NBA, MLB, NFL, college football, all of them combined, which whatever. But he was talking about how successful it was. And he's like, oh yeah, we just signed a bigger contract with the slap league than UFC signed in 2007 with Spike. And I was like, yeah, I'd hope so. the media rights deals from 2007 compared to 2023, there's no conversation. What are you talking about? Like, whenever he said that, I knew he was speaking to people that did not understand the back end of the business, and the people that did understand the back end of the business would roll their eyes and be like, yeah, I would certainly hope you got a better deal than you're $1 billion industry now. Of course you're going to get a better deal because you have
like
resources.
The Big 12 saying, well, we got a bigger deal without Texas and Oklahoma 12 years later.
Yeah. And I mean, in spite of. That's why they got a bigger deal. Is to save the conference. Let's be very honest here. And I think, look, unless they want this to completely break down and this end up as a 2-team conference, somebody's got to step up to the plate. Because if nobody wants to step up, that's what will happen. And I don't think that's good for college football. But like, that seems to be where it's going.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's where I feel like, and Coach, go ahead, jump in there. But I feel like this is where you hurt college football is by losing a lot of these programs that you're used to seeing. I don't think that college football is as good without Notre Dame being relevant. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a Notre Dame fan, but I feel that way. Go ahead, Coach. You're muted. You're still muted.
Hell, I'm not used. I'm used to the old chalkboards, guys. No, in all honesty, guys, I really don't have a lot in this area to really speak of. I think you guys hit a lot of great points. So you're not going to get anything from me on this.
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously Notre Dame is going to have, tell us about that, JJ, because I want to know what is the, obviously they have some kind of vote in this as well. So, I mean, because they can't really get out unless it's dissolved. And I think the idea of it getting dissolved before like 2030, it seems far-fetched to me.
It's certainly far-fetched. And look, and I can tell you this, should the ACC get more money? Yes. If teams really were this far behind, and if you do the number process, obviously I think it starts in 2027. The ACC starts to make more money from than the Big 12.
Then the Big 12, yes,
renegotiates at 2030.
Of course, it's going to get renegotiated.
Yeah. And so now here's the thing, though. I think the Big 12. The question is, what kind of product are they going to put out there? That's the question that Yormark talked about. He said there's going to be a great product, but if there's not a great product, does that go down? Because obviously you're no longer having Oklahoma and Texas.
And I think that's why they're having to supplement with basketball schools too, because they know that they need to dominate that. They need to continue dominating that.
They have to. And I think that's going to be the main issue with them going forward. But I can tell you this is, no one's going to be even able to touch potentially leaving until 2030. But even when that first school goes to court, because it's going to happen, I think personally and I think ESPN technically, from things I've heard just in terms of the actual markets, I would not be shocked if ESPN starts to have a conversation with these schools when 2030 hits. Because, look, ESPN won't have a problem with being able to renegotiate if it's 6 years. They're not going to renegotiate at 13 years. They're going to take this product that's really good, that's really cheap, and be able to use it for as much as they possibly can. Now, when the schools get closer to 2030, that's when I think some of these schools are really going to test the waters. They're going to really try to go to court and break it. But the fact is, what will ESPN do? Are they going to let it break off, or are they going to save their ass with the market along with the ACC network that they built, that they founded, they sponsored with the ACC? Personally, I think they ended up chalking up some money to make people happy, especially the larger brands in that conference. The question at this point is, does it happen earlier or does it happen later? No matter what, none of these schools in there are going to be. They can say whatever they want. They're hunky-dory. They're happy. Everyone's kumbaya. They're all moving together. They're not. Look, there's plenty of, if not every school in that conference is upset, especially the top brands in terms of Clemson, Florida State, UNC. They're not going to be happy, and which is very much in terms of what makes sense. They shouldn't be happy. You want to be competitive no matter what all the time.
That's right.
Like, just the reality is And I understand that, whether it's, it's Swaim or, some of these other people that just want the certain collapses, or they're just putting out fake sources. I can tell you that none of these teams are going to challenge in court when you have millions and millions, and not just millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on the table. I'm sorry. We talked about this earlier. The presidents of these schools don't care. These are the same presidents that signed this horrific deal. I mean, let's just talk about this in terms of business. If we talk about a long-term plan in business, that's 5 years now. That's not even 10 years. So, John Swofford, before he retired, puts, look, the payout in 2016, it was competitive. But for 20 years, the stupidity behind that deal, I can't even begin to tell you. And it just gets back to some of these presidents. They have a lot of these higher degrees. They're very well educated, which they are. But when it comes down to business, they lack it severely. I mean, in 20 years, someone should have said, hey, guys, in 20 years, let's just consider our age for a second. If I'm 40 years old making this deal, I'm going to be 60 in 20 years. What the hell is that going to look like? Let's be honest. The whole market is completely changed. Okay. So when you look at it in general, it was a horrific deal. Okay. Which, a lot of these presidents, unfortunately, do consistently. Okay. Whether it's firing coaches and paying $30 or $40 million to pay some of these buyouts, it never ends sometimes. But when you look at this deal, it was a bad in terms of long term. The payouts were there, but in the long term for 20 years, it's just not there. So that's why I think when you start to see something around 2030, I wouldn't be shocked. But in the 2028 to 2030, I really think you find someone that really pushes the envelope and then goes to court. But me personally, I think that Magnificent Seven was made up to create pressure, to create the incentive plan, to at least create some type of relief for some of these schools who really believe, hey, we're going to the NCAA tournament. We're going to the bowl games. We're going to the college football playoff. I mean, $20 million. I mean, the top payout from this past year from the ACC was $43 million. Add on $20 million to that, you're at $63 million. That's pretty competitive right now. So I think overall it helps, but I think it just keeps everything where it's at. You're not going to close the overall gap when the Big Ten gets to $100 million, or when the SEC gets to $80 to $90 million. You're not going to close the gap, but it creates some sort of in terms of competitiveness, you're getting somewhat closer and making some people happy in the meantime.
I love it. I think it's as succinct as you could put it too. And the thing is I really do hope that we do keep some semblance of what we're used to. But I do feel like we've talked about this a lot. I don't know that you can stop the train on the tracks now. I mean, at some point it's probably going to end up there, but I don't think that you help yourself if you're ESPN, and I'm not sure that I care. But you don't help yourself if you're ESPN at this point if you don't do something soon. It is bad business. I think it's been bad business all the way around. All right, let's wait real quick though. Ty, were you saying that if they like it again, it does help?
I'm messing around. No,
okay. I was like, wait a minute, no, it doesn't.
I'm messing around with truth right now. That's why I said that's what big YouTube doesn't want people to know.
Right. All right, we're going to move to this next one. Please do hit the like button, guys. I know I put it in there already, but it really does help. And make sure that if you're not already a subscriber to that channel there, Talking Sports with J.J. Kitchen, you should be over there watching this guy. This dude has a lot of great sources. He makes sure that this is not one of those guys that's just going to tell you a bunch of BS to get clicks and make sure that you're going to, continue to go to his page and hear a bunch of BS. You're just not going to get it. I have really, really enjoyed your channel myself there, JJ. I was excited to get you on the show, and I appreciate you coming on too. So last thing we're going to talk about, and then we got a bonus, but let's jump into this real quick. I was reading a piece there on Fansided, actually. No, that's not the one I was looking at. Actually was reading another piece. I believe it's the Irish something or other, but they were talking about the fact, Coach, your Notre Dame Fighting Irish are now making a significant move into Texas again, to where they're recruiting heavily in the state of Texas. You saw it last year. We don't need to bring up Peyton Bowen, but you did get 3 amazing receivers out of the state. Jaden Greathouse looks like he's ready to put in right now. Is this making that a priority? Is this the missing link for Notre Dame to possibly be able to compete for a national title? You're on mute again.
Damn it.
It's big YouTube. I told you. They're here. They knew. I said the secret, and now they're here.
There you go.
There we go. And so, yeah, I got in a dadgum car the other day and drove out to South Bend and sat down with Coach Freeman and told him, look, we got to start getting some Texas kids, boy. If we want to win some football games, we got to get some speed out here. No, I tell you what, Coach Freeman's done and his staff have done an incredible job of getting back into Texas and recruiting the great state of Texas again. You know, we just picked up an edge rusher out of Katy, Texas, Logan Thomas, which I know OU was after him and a few other schools. So we were glad to pick him up. And you also mentioned Jaden Greathouse. He looked tremendous in the spring football game. And he was making plays all over the field, and I think you're going to see all of our
how
freshmen.
That guy got out of Austin is beyond me.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I don't see how they let him out of the backyard. So, but
I don't either. It happens so often, but it's so weird to me. Go ahead, Coach. Sorry.
Well, and then we picked up another. You know, we've really been focused on the wide receivers across the state. We picked up Braylon James from over in Round Rock over at Stony Point. There's another one that probably, Texas. I don't know why they let him get out either. And then Caleb Smith out of Frisco, Reedy. And then you had Micaiah Bell, a defensive back, and out of Houston. So we're finally starting to recruit Texas again. I think that's going to have a big impact on Notre Dame football. We're getting some good skill players out of the state of Texas.
Right.
And so I think it's going to – I think we're going to see – matter of fact, I think we're going to see quite a few of those names I just mentioned impact the football team this coming season. And so we're super excited about that. So I just we need to have some of those guys step up and play well. But once again, I think coming out of Texas, those kids know how to play football. And again, I'm still pissed off at OU over Peyton Bowen. Because
I'm just glad at me as an Alabama fan didn't catch any strays about Keon Keeley.
Oh, I love it. Jeez. But, hey, life is good. And Notre Dame, we're going to try to have a decent year and maybe finish in the top 50.
Well, I think he clearly did a great job. I mean, and I think that Coach Freeman, after that loss, obviously the one that you didn't want to see him have to Marshall last year, they certainly turned it around, looked really good. You've talked about it. They had it not been right towards the end of the game. I mean, the fact that Notre Dame couldn't throw and they stayed in the USC game as long as they did, it tells you something about who they are.
Don't talk about Notre Dame quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Listen, right now you've got Notre Dame quarterbacks. Yeah, let's talk about Notre Dame quarterbacks.
Yeah, let's talk
They've
about
got a Wake Forest quarterback that they brought in.
Do we have to?
You kind of wonder why Alabama didn't do that. But listen, I think that was the biggest thing missing from that. I think we've talked about that, Coach. The biggest thing missing from that roster a year ago was the fact you didn't have a guy that could throw it around the yard. You have running backs two of them that could get after it. You've got a great line. You're in your defense. You got a defensive head coach. And you got rid of an offensive coordinator in Tommy Reese that you weren't impressed with. I'm just busting your chops right now, Ty. But in the end, I feel like that could be a big deal for these guys.
Absolutely, and Ty, I'm really interested to see how that plays out over at Alabama, because I can't believe that either the offense coordinator or the quarterback can be of any help to Alabama in any way.
Well, I'll say this. Bill O'Brien ran the most nonsensical offense at a college level, I could imagine, because he tried to implement his NFL option routes at college for X, Y, and Z wide receivers. The problem is you don't have those guys for 6 years.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, some of these guys are true freshmen, and he's telling Bryce, like, hey, you have to read. The reason, I don't know if you ever noticed with Bill O'Brien, Bama snapped the ball with 1 or 2 seconds on the play clock consistently. It's because they gave Bryce 4 plays and said, pick whatever you want to do. Yeah. Bryce, it is a good thing Bryce Young was there, boys. I'm telling you, when I say his football IQ helped, but that's a reason why when Jalen Milroe got in there, they asked him to run that option style thing, and he's sitting there like, this isn't what I do. Like, there are only a few quarterbacks at the college level who are going to grasp this in 1 year, and you're asking me in one game. Yeah. I like Reese because I think he's creative, but the Buckner transfer, that I get it because, Coach, I think you'll agree with me when I say this. Buckner has moments where you watch him make a throw, a sequence of throws, and you're like, wow. South Carolina, for instance, there was a play where the South Carolina edge is bearing down on him, and he sidearms a ball about 30 yards downfield on a rope and a dime.
Yep.
Later, that drive was the 106-yard pick six, where the defender never moved. He stood right there and just
right to him.
You. And I'm sitting there like, how did I go from watching the throw where my jaw drops, and then the next moment my jaw drops for a completely different reason, and I'm like, what is happening? Yeah, no.
Very, very, very inconsistent, and picks or picks are something that happen for him all the time.
Yeah, I am too, Truth. Don't worry, it was hard to do.
I'll tell you what, I was really shocked to see Alabama hire Tommy Rees. Personally, I thought Notre Dame was going to hit the home run and hire Andy Ludwig. I really did. That was the guy that here's the thing. At the end of the day, I think Notre Dame has their guy in Freeman. I think he's a hell of a coach. I think he's young. He'll be there for the next 30 years. That guy is for real. He can coach, but guess what? He can recruit. He can recruit at that school and elite talent. And he showed that he's actually doing a better job than what Kelly did there. My question is, though, I'm very shocked at who they hired. I thought if you would have gotten Ludwig, Notre Dame is now. I got news for you. Notre Dame is for real. They're coming quick. But the fact that they hired Parker, man, I don't know.
And over $1 million or some crap like that, which was it pissed Coach right off. He was wound up.
They fired him at West Virginia. I watched him. I don't know. Look, he knows something that we don't know, and that's fine. But man, I thought Notre Dame would have been a stud hire with Andy Ludwig. Oh my God!
I was there with you, and that's when Tommy Rees got hired at Alabama, that was the first name that I went to was Ludwig. Because he would have been a difference maker. We would have definitely been a top 4 team in the country. Easy, absolutely, and. So that's got that's my big question mark heading into this season is what's that offense going to look like? So because that's the thing that can hurt us more than anything. I think the rest of his staff he has in place, I feel really good about. Right. But that's the one question mark, and obviously, guys, that's. I think
recruiting wise, he's showing that he's getting into rooms that you weren't seeing Notre Dame get into before. And Ty, that's where I would kind of come back to you on that, was that some of these guys that you've seen that I know the whole deal with Peyton Bowen, and I know it upsets you and it should upset you. But the truth is Notre Dame wasn't getting in there before. That wasn't going to happen, years past. It's kind of the same thing that I'll tell you, Sooner Cowboys, now that you're in here. These guys, Oklahoma wasn't in the room of these big defensive tackles that they're in the room of now in years past either. Since Coach Venables left. That's what I'm getting at with the whole deal with Notre Dame. Now, is it still an uphill climb? Yeah. But getting into the state of Texas, who produces more professional football players than any other state, it's got to be a big thing, doesn't it, Ty?
Look, you can never go. There are a few states where if you want to set up a base camp at, do it. Texas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Alabama, California. And I'm just saying, as far as a per capita basis, I tried to find it earlier, but I couldn't, so I'm going to have to rely off the top of my head, and that's not good for anybody. If I'm not mistaken, there are 31 top 300 prospects in the state of Florida, 37 in the state of Texas, something like 28 in the state of Georgia, something like 17 in the state of Louisiana, 10 in the state of Alabama, and 21 in the state of California. But I mean, you're talking about a substantial portion of your top 300 from two states, Texas and Florida. I mean, and great population-wise. Notre Dame with Marcus Freeman, he is getting in rooms and clicking with these recruits in a way that I think is going to be big for Notre Dame. I like Brian Kelly, coach, but I don't think there's any conversation that he doesn't click the same way that Marcus Freeman did. And that's not to say there's a right or wrong way to do it. I'm just saying in the current capacity for where Notre Dame is at, Marcus Freeman relates to these kids. Whereas I actually think Brian Kelly, as crazy as this is, boys, is actually a better fit for how LSU would recruit, where it's like, okay, we're LSU. Yeah. We got the attitude, we got the swagger. Like, I don't need to relate to you. You know what it's so different.
And I tell you, I couldn't agree with you more, Ty. And I was going to bring that up. I'm glad you did. But like you were saying, Brian Kelly was not a very good recruiter at Notre Dame. But you know what? He didn't get into many homes either, guys. He was not into the recruiting picture as much as probably what I thought he should have been, or other people thought he should have been. And he really depended on all of his assistant coaches to be great recruiters. And unfortunately, they weren't. And thus we weren't getting in those homes for those top athletes. And like you said, Brian Kelly, or not Brian Kelly, but you know, now we're getting in those homes because Brian didn't do that. And so, no, I agree with you. I think Marcus is doing a tremendous job, but I also say that his assistant coaches are doing a tremendous job recruiting as well.
Yeah, you know, you look at Brian Kelly, me and my family, you know, we're going to head down south for this game here today.
Yeah.
You know, here's the thing. At the end of the day, Notre Dame upgraded. I just think of culture and character. I think Freeman is a much better fit. You know, I've got plenty of guys up here in Pittsburgh. Kurt Heinisch, for instance, is a really good friend of mine, played at Notre Dame.
Yep.
Captain there. Not exactly the biggest, you know, Brian Kelly fan. What he did say, though, is Freeman, it's a different game now. It's a different game, and expect much better results in terms of being able to recruit. But he's a player's coach. He cares about those guys. I always tell people, one of the things I always tell you, especially recruits, doesn't matter how much you know until they know how much you care. And that guy cares more about those players than anyone that Brian Kelly ever treated. You know, Phil Dracovic, I know him as well. Yep. He said the same exact thing. He said Freeman is the legitimate, real reason why that school will succeed, because he has the charisma. He's got the mentality of how you actually care about players. That's why I love Freeman. That's why he's going to do a hell of a job there.
And you know, another thing, not only does he care about his players and his coaches, but guys, look at what he cares about the other programs, and just his heart for that school is incredible. And by the way, I do need to mention we did win the national championship in lacrosse this weekend.
I did see that.
And Freeman was there
in Philly. Yep.
But again, I think you bring up a great point with that, because he will make them successful.
Yeah, and guys, again, I feel like, and guys, as far as you Oklahoma fans that are in here, I'm going to tell you that I hadn't studied a ton of this DeJoun Terry. I know who he is. I'm glad that he's getting over and taking a look at Oklahoma. That's definitely something that's needed there. We've talked about that at length. And I will get into it later on this week. I've been moving and doing a lot of stuff, so I'm going to tell you that the recruiting pages has not been the place that I've stuck with the most over the last couple of weeks. But I will jump into that later on this week, and we'll definitely get to talking about it. And I agree with you. Definitely that's what it has to happen. It's not just, I mean, the Sooner Cowboy, you hadn't been here the whole time, but some of the things, fix OU defensive recruiting. This is what's going on now. It doesn't happen overnight. That's what I would tell you about that part of it. It just doesn't happen overnight. But again, they're getting into rooms that they never got into before. They're going to end up with at least 2 of these guys, I would think. I think at least 2. I feel like there's an opportunity to get 3. And I know, Ty, you talked about this a lot on your show the other day, and I enjoyed that as well. But I'm telling you now, something that's going to happen is these guys are going to start getting to Oklahoma and they're not going to get as many of them as Alabama. They're never going to do that. It's never going to happen. They're never going to get as many as Georgia. That's not the way that they're going to recruit there. That's not the way it was done at Clemson either, by the way. It's just not the way it happened, right? And, okay, so good. I'm glad to know that it wasn't just me not paying attention, because I do try to keep ahead of it with my, notifications and stuff, but I hadn't seen it.
I
cannot miss out on Stone. Yeah, maybe you can, maybe you can't. If you get 3 other guys, then you can miss out on Stone. And here's the deal: if Stone's mama says he ain't coming and he doesn't go, well, how can you blame that on anybody at all? I just don't think you can do that.
The tough part is I agree with Sooner Cowboy. Stone is a must-land prospect, but at the same time, you're 100% right, Jason. You are 1,000% right. And I actually had PG break it down on the show the other day.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, so,
I was there.
Because I think it's very important. We've all heard it, and I think it needs to be understood. This isn't Jordan Renaud, where it's like this is a battle, and Freddie Roach just wins one. First off, if you lose a recruiting battle for a defensive lineman to Freddie Roach, you probably get back in your car and are like, yeah, it's Freddie Roach. Just like any of those guys that lost a recruiting battle to Todd Bates for the defensive line, they got back in their car and they were like, yeah.
Larry Johnson at freaking Ohio State, the freaking godfather, the same shit. And this is what we're talking about. And they lost Hicks last year to a bag of freaking cash that showed up an hour before he was going to make his commitment.
Guys,
and the one area I will give A&M, they do well with their defensive line. That's the one area where I'll give any praise to A&M. The defensive line has been solid. It's underachieved, I grant you that, but it has at least been a backbone for that team. How Jimbo's an offensive-minded coach, and the best thing he's ever had is his defense at A&M. That's beyond me, but that's neither here nor there.
And I'll give you this one part right there. He does need to sell it to Mama. But if she's not sellable on it, because there's a reason he's at IMG instead of still playing in Del City.
True. Well,
go ahead. I know you're about to say something.
I was just going to say we sold it to Mama on Peyton Bowen too. Mama doesn't always make the decision at the end of the day. But I already forgot the other thing I was going to say. That's what happens when you get old, boys.
The thing is, though, when somebody you've already sent him off once, Jason. You go.
Hey, so I don't forget it again. So no, OU guys, OU defensively, if you're not paying attention, or either you're not paying attention or you don't know football, because they're getting better defensively. They are recruiting some defensive players, and they're fixing to be better defensively than they've been in years. So you need to be careful with knocking the defense that they're not recruiting well, because they're doing a hell of a job recruiting defensively.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that this expectation, when you've overturned over 85% of the roster in a year, that tells you that they're doing the work. And they've definitely improved. I mean, if you watched any of the spring game, which I know we all did, I don't know that JJ did necessarily, but if you watched any of the spring game there, for sure that they got better defensively. They got better on the defensive line. They got better at linebacker. They got better at, and particularly in that secondary, they got better. It's going to be better. It's just going to take some time, and this thought process that OU is just supposed to be able to reload and be Alabama tomorrow. It's a little, the expectations are a little much there on that side of it. And that's all I'm going to say about it. All right, we're going to go.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
Well,
I'm over here sowing the seeds of dissent.
Yeah. I know you are. Well, why not? Yeah, listen, I wish that. And look, man, I'm not unlike any other Oklahoma fan out there to want to see them win a freaking national championship yesterday. I do, and I feel like they can. But if you're not looking at what they were at this time last year and what they are now, I mean, I get it. We are a microwave society. We want everything now, But the truth is, I'm telling you, my favorite guy, and I think David Stone needs to be a guy that they get. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, Sooner Cowboys. I want to see that, right? But I'm going to tell you this. To me, my favorite is Nigel. Nigel Smith is my favorite guy. And that includes, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I still feel like you're going to get Williams Nwaneri. And I think that Jonas or J.J., I just going to call him J.J. because I screw up his name every time. Or J.J.A., I'm sorry. See, I screw it up every time. I love him too. And then there's the opportunity that you're going to get the kid that from LSU as well. There's guys that are there. When it comes to Zadavian Sims, I think he's an afterthought at this point. Not to say that he couldn't run, end up there anyway. I mean, they flipped a 5-star a year ago. Why couldn't they do it again? I don't understand why you couldn't. That's just my feelings on it. But in the end, I would like to say that, at some point, Hall of Fame, these guys are patient waiting to talk. Who is?
I think it's because there was a moment where we all kind of jumped in, like laughing and adding in, just ad-libbing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got it. I got thrown off there for a second, man. I get it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. All right. No, listen. In the end, I'm going to reserve judgment here, and my expectation levels. I mean, I expect that they with the schedule they should win a lot, right? And I also know that there's some PTSD out there because of the David Hicks situation last year. I understand it. I mean, I do. But in the end, I think you have to take an overall look here and give it a little bit of time. Let's not be that knee-jerk about this whole deal and expect it all to come together in 1 year. And the other part of it is, and Coach, you said this a bunch. Help me on this last point of it, and we'll move forward. The learning curve for head coaches is significant. Even if you've been a coach forever, there's time that you need that year to kind of learn what you're doing in that standpoint.
Absolutely. The learning curve for a head coach is, I don't care what level you're talking about, but especially at the collegiate level, right. That learning curve is huge. I don't care if you're been an offense coordinator or defense coordinator for 15, 20 years. When you step into that head coach's office, everything changes.
Sure.
And the statement was made earlier, golly, you're the, the president doesn't even do what you do, to be quite honest, because you're dealing with boosters, you're dealing with players, you're dealing with players' parents, you're dealing with, all the people that you deal with in a day is incredible. And then you got to worry about making sure that you're preparing your team, your coaches, and you're coaching your coaches, you're preparing your team to be prepared for the next ball game. And everything else that goes along with it, traveling to the ball game, and I know he's got people that help him do some of these things, but still he's got to be concerned with everything that goes on. Traveling is a big deal, guys. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but I tell you what, all the crap you got to get prepared for when you travel to a ball game is incredible. So no, the learning curve is huge, and you got to give these guys coming in a chance to wrap their heads around this stuff. And a lot of these guys, if they have a good mentor, that makes all the difference in the world. And I know that's the big difference, if they've got a good mentor that can come in and help them, or hire those people in those positions that can help you work through that process.
Sure.
And I think it was somebody mentioned on here earlier, something about the doctors and the coaches. The coaches do more than the doctorates do with the presidents, and I think we've even been discussing that a little bit. And so those coaches, I'm telling you, those head coaches have an incredible job to do. Probably the most important on a campus, to be honest.
Yeah. And guys, here's we're going to finish it after this. That this is coming back to you, Matt, right here. A little bit of a troll. I knew you were. And listen, you're not alone in this. Everybody has PTSD when it comes to last season. I think, and this is something we've talked about on this show a lot, it could have been a very different season if not for a couple of little things. Dylan Gabriel going down. If they were better in the trenches, of course. But they weren't getting better in the trenches with Lincoln Riley. They weren't. They were never going to get better in the trenches with Lincoln. I know that he got Bear to go to SC, and I know that Ty doesn't necessarily agree with this on this at all, but I'm going to tell you how I feel about it is that Lincoln, you got to get deeper there than that. And so what they did in the portal this year, plus adding these guys, you still need to go and get them, right? Because Bear's not going to play freaking 70 plays. He's not. Even if he loses 30 pounds, that dude is not playing 30 plays or 70 plays. But yes, they got beat in the trenches, and they have been getting beat in the trenches before. But that doesn't mean that you can microwave this thing and all of a sudden you're a national championship team. You're just not going to be. So do I agree that it needs to happen? Yes. Do I think it is starting to happen? Yes. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Probably not. Right? If they get one or two of these guys, you got to give it time to develop, guys. You just have to do it. And that's where I'm at on it. And I know I was giving you all kinds of shit on around the table the other day, Sooner Cowboys. But listen, and I agree with you on this. I told you this last week that 8-4 better be their bottom, or else there's more problems.
Schedule, good God. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I've said, Ty, I've said this to you too. For sure. These guys have to step up and do better than they did a year ago. There's no two ways around it, particularly when you have done what you've done in recruiting. Now it's time for you to show up, right? Period. It's just how it's going to have to be. So I'm with you on that. I'm totally 100%. I feel the same way that they better not lose more than 4. They just shouldn't. And to be honest with you, I have a hard time finding 4 losses in that schedule. Maybe, there's 4 teams that might be able to beat them. Are they all going to beat them? There ain't no damn way, And so it is what it is, But in the end, I just feel like this is one of those things that you have to look at. You got to give it a little longer on it. And, I'll be the first to tell you I was wrong. If BV is not the guy, he's not the guy. Not everybody is that is a longtime coordinator. Recruiting-wise, he's better than they've had there in a long time.
No doubt.
And
if I may, Coach, I just wanted to add one thing because I've said this for a year now, and it piggybacks perfectly off of your point. I've told you before I was going into the legal field, and then I kind of did the 180 and came here. And on the other podcast we do on my show, Chris Griffin does the Horn Down podcast. He's an attorney in Norman. Mm-hmm. And so we were doing the show, and I told him right before the season started, I said, Chris, you can be the best litigator in your law firm. You can be that guy. Mm-hmm. But if you get promoted tomorrow as you run the firm, it doesn't matter that you were the best litigator in the because you're not litigating anymore. Nope. Your job is totally different. You now have a totally different set of responsibilities, and I have no doubt you're a brilliant litigator, but you have to learn. You have to learn. And people need to understand it's a learning process. And I think, Coach, you said it so beautifully. People don't respect what a tough jump it is from high school football to college football. We might as well call it 2 different things. Like it might as well be high school sarcastaball and college football. It's 2 different sports. Yeah. And the same can be said for coaching. I don't think people respect how difficult this is.
I agree with you.
Right.
Well
all right.
Said.
We're going to jump ahead here. This is bonus content because it kind of hit right before we came on, and I think it's important to talk, especially with what we've been talking about, a lot of realignment tonight. I'm going to share this article real quick here.
Hey, I will throw this in for you guys just as a tidbit. Hell, I had to go. I moved into being a college administrator, and so being a coach, everybody would always say, "Oh, dumb old coach here." Being a college administrator. So I did give my doctorate. So I make everybody call me Dr. Coach.
Dr. Coach, I love it.
That way they couldn't attack me on either end.
Right. I'm gonna give this one to you guys at the top right now. JJ, you can start, and then we'll go with Ty after that. But talk to me about this. What you think about this? I mean, we talked about this a little bit, kicking out unproductive teams, and it almost seems a little bit like what you said, Ty, earlier, was a little bit of European soccer style in some of these larger conferences. Can you see this happening?
Yeah, this is going down, guys. I mean, it's going to eventually come to this point. I think everybody feels like right now, if you're in those conferences, you're safe. But the fact is, though, if you're not performing, which is kind of funny how Nebraska's bringing this up of all teams, to be quite honest with you, it's kind of like, you're kind of ratting on yourself. You're kind of like, hey, I like to get kicked out too. But, hey, look, it's coming. I know.
I think this may just come from the Nebraska Reporter for them, but
Okay.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this: it's going to happen. I think when you look at teams like like in the Big Ten, Northwestern, Illinois, Rutgers, I think you're going to have teams that look like that potentially move out. I think Wisconsin made a good move by hiring Luke Fickell. I thought that was a really great hire. I think they're going to take over that side of the division until the Big Ten really figures out that they need to go to one to make it more competitive. Purdue could be on the chopping block. There's a number of schools in there that I think that are certainly overrated, to say the least. It's really a three-headed monster at this point. Really, I would say really
Rutgers
two-headed monster. Yeah. You look at really it's Michigan and Ohio State leading the pack. Penn State's in the middle there. They obviously get their 9 wins or 10 wins a year. But you look at the rest of that conference, Michigan State really took a deep dive. I think Mel Tucker's in for a real tough sledding ride.
Yeah.
And they owe him a hell of a lot of money too, buddy.
Yeah, he's not going anywhere.
They owe him a hell of a lot of money.
Yep, and I think that was a bad deal after one good season. I just think in general, look, it's going to come to the SEC too. I mean, Missouri could be on the chopping block. Arkansas has got to pick it up. I mean, those teams got to figure out what to do.
You said an A team. That's the wrong A team, though.
Auburn, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Boys, we could have a year where I, as an Alabama fan, get to see Auburn struggle, and then at the end of the year, get to see them booted from the SEC. Sign me up. I mean, that's as quality television as I could possibly imagine. In seriousness, though, I do think that this is interesting. The more we kind of get away from some of the conversations we've had, right? Like this regionalism within college football, this tribalism that college football and college athletics in and of itself creates. The more we go to this national stage, you want to have intrigue, right? You want to have these things. And I don't know like what it will look like in particular, but I do think it's very funny, JJ, like you said, that it's a Nebraska
site
beat writer putting this out. It's like, how are you hating from outside the club? You can't even get in.
God, you just hired you literally just hired a coach after you're struggling so bad. Like, good Lord.
Who are you?
Like, hey, Purdue just won your division. Come on, guys.
I don't know how deep into UFC you are, but one of my favorite moments, and I know this is a very casual UFC, one of my favorite moments in UFC the past few years is whenever Conor and Eddie Alvarez were going to fight, and it was Madison Square Garden. They hadn't done an event there, huge UFC in New York City. And they asked Conor McGregor, Conor, who's the biggest threat to you at the 145-pound division? And the guy behind him says, me. I'm the real hardest hitting 145er. When I touch people, they go to sleep. And Conor McGregor just turns around and goes, Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that guy?
That's one of my favorite moments in USC.
And it was done. I don't know who that guy, Jeremy Stevens, but like,
that was great.
It reminds me of this. It's just like, this isn't Ohio State saying this. This isn't Michigan saying this. It's like, who the f- is this guy?
Yeah, I love it. Now, obviously, guys, again, this isn't a for sure thing, but this is something that Joe Klatt had kind of floated that out there, that he felt like it's not something that's that far away from happening. And I mean, you could see it kind of happening, right? To me, when you've got schools like, I mean, hell, they haven't even started paying Maryland and freaking Rutgers the same money in the Big Ten yet. They're going to pay USC and UCLA more money before they start paying these guys, right? That's and we have had a lot of good views. Thank you guys, and thank you very much, Adela, for helping out with that. But again, listen, I can see it happening, because if you're not bringing any viewers, like Hank said, and James was saying up there, they were brought in for those TV markets, but who the hell wants to watch Rutgers in Maryland? Maybe, it's not good football. It's not good football. You would, and I guarantee even Maryland and Rutgers fans are probably would rather watch somebody such as, the bigger, the SEC schools, or I could see them watching Pitt games against West Virginia for sure. That's going to go over anything that you're going to see, between those two programs. I just don't see that it's been that helpful for them. So it doesn't seem that far-fetched that if you're not bringing anything really to the table, why would you want them to stay there and get that much? And if they start getting that big amount of money, how long do you give them before you're like, hey, why the hell ain't you better?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's a question that you have to ask, just in general. They're getting, they're not getting as much as everybody else in the Big Ten, but they're getting damn near close to it. So why are you still only winning 3 or 4 games a year? You're supposed to have all these facilities. He just did a huge, Greg Schiano just did a podcast with Brenneman. And I think that was a great interview. But when you look at that, when you look at that team and that school, something's got to change eventually. You're getting a lot of money from this conference. If you still can't find a way to even be remotely competitive, to even just go to the bowl games, I think you need to have a conversation about, is that team even worth being in the conference?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you look at it, last year, Nebraska, now obviously Matt Rule took over. This guy is a program builder. He's done it everywhere, even at Temple, who was one of these, it said on here. You remember that Temple got kicked out of the Big East at one point because they were that bad. They were that bad. And the Big East is not even a conference anymore, but and he rebuilt that school. Look at what happened with Baylor once, everything that happened with Art Briles. Baylor did not have the look of a program that was on the way to bounce back up, and look at what Matt did when he got there. So I have a hard time thinking that he won't do it. I think he's going to have to do some things that nobody's seems to have been willing to do since that point. But I do think that there's some struggles there. You can't be losing to Northwestern, and man, it's just so crazy to me.
They went all the way to Ireland to lose to Northwestern. Oh my
good
God!
Grief! You could have stayed home for that shit, right?
Oh
yeah,
that's just a kick right in the thigh. Oh man! You think you're going out there for a nice trip? You're going to drink some nice Dublin beer, but instead you get your ass kicked by Northwestern. I don't know.
I'm sure they would have taken themselves out of the Big Ten at that point if they could have.
Yeah. And the thing is that my question would be, though, is this something that would happen in the SEC, though? Because to me, it seems like the SEC is not really looking to do something like that. Vanderbilt hasn't done anything, obviously in a very long time. They don't look like they're getting a ton better. They did beat Florida a year ago or last year, and High Top. I don't know if you're still around, but but that being said, look, these guys, could you see that happening, Ty? Could you see that happening in the SEC? Because it seems to me like they seem to be more aligned with each other and pulling for each other more, right?
Yes and no. At the end of the day, the almighty dollar rules all. You know what I mean? So if it gets to be a more advantageous position for them to adopt this concept, I have no doubt Greg Sankey will adopt the concept. And I am in favor if it means kicking out Auburn. But at the same time, it is interesting, though, because it was just a year ago where an alliance formed between the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 in order to kind of...
It's been almost 2 years now, but yes, the alliance, the handshake alliance, hilarious.
And it was almost like we're holier than thou of the members of the Big 12 and the SEC. And the whole time, the exact same thing is happening there, which I don't mind. That's business, right? If you see another conference do it, it's only advantageous for the Big 10 to do the same thing. That's business.
Right.
But I don't know that anybody is looking out for anybody else other than their own best interests.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think that's
Oh, well, that's true. I'm not. That's not what I'm getting at.
No,
you know?
but that's why I say, like,
I think in their own best interest, you want to keep some of these also rans like Mizzou around and even
yes,
Texas
I
A&M.
agree. I agree. I agree.
You know.
Well, I tell you one damn thing, guys. We at Notre Dame not worried about that shit.
Not yet until they come up with that rule that you have to be in a conference to play in the college football playoff, which don't think for a second.
Touchdown Jesus will not let that rule come about.
Praise be.
Here we go. All right. Listen, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Guys, I've really enjoyed this show. We are over 2 hours. And it's like it just started.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you guys hanging around as long as you did. But folks, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Ty, go ahead, since you're up on the screen, let everybody know how to find you. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Absolutely, man. You can't bring me on here and have it go an hour. I have
that's true.
habit of saying,
It's
okay,
not
guys,
you,
it's
though.
going to be
We
an
like
hour
to
stream
talk.
today, and I look up and it's 3 hours in, and I'm
no.
oh my God, I'm sorry. You can find me at Around the Table Sports. I just do college football content. That's about it.
That's awesome. JJ, our new panel member, and I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I appreciate your kind words you've said about me the last few times, and I've been enjoying your show a lot. Let everybody know how to find you.
Yeah, first, obviously, Jason, Ty, Coach, just want to say this was incredible. The amount of content that you guys bring, just knowledge in general. This is why this is the stuff that matters, because the national media doesn't want to cover the nitty-gritty stuff and tell the truth. So again, thank you guys for allowing me to come on. Jason, you do a hell of a job. So again, it's a privilege to be on here to try to add a little bit of value, to bring something to what you guys bring. So again, thank you for having me on. Of course, you can find me over at YouTube at Talking College Football with J.J. Kitchen, and you can find me on Twitter at JJ_Kitchen40. So again, thank you guys. Just again, you guys were incredible. So thank you for allowing me to have just a little bit of a part.
Hey man, we definitely again appreciate, and anybody who talks that nicely about us, which is rare, to be honest with you, you can come on anytime and anytime you want. You're welcome to come on. You can of course find us at hallofamemedia.us. Also you can find me on Twitter at BirdieManDub. I still haven't gotten Coach to get a Twitter yet. I don't know if it's gonna happen.
I got one, but I ain't using that shit.
Probably smart, Coach. Probably smart.
See, that's an admission that I hadn't gotten out of you yet. So there may be hope yet, folks.
He's the smartest amongst us.
He might be. He definitely. And in fact, that's it's not even a might at this point. When it comes to
it's because I'm the oldest amongst.
You don't
us.
have the brain rot that Twitter gives you. The brain.
And it will, dude. It's such a freaking cesspool on Twitter. My God. But listen, that's where you creators have to be. And look, I'm super excited. I've been letting you guys know coming on. We've been doing some moving and stuff. I'm here where Coach is at. We're about to be in studio together within a matter of weeks, starting this new gig here at one of my old stomping grounds. We're excited about it, man. We're about to put an amazing show together. We're going to be going daily. So it's one of those things. I'm excited about it. It's going to take some time, but continue to stick with us. I'm excited about the whole thing. Make sure that you are sharing us with your friends. And, hit that like button if you haven't already. Guys, we've already went over 100 viewers. That's more than we've been getting lately. So I appreciate that. It must be because of the guests that we've had on today, Coach, because it ain't my mug. I know that.
And Jason, I tell you what, I sit here in awe of you guys and the knowledge that you have. And I pick up so much from listening to you guys that it's incredible. And I appreciate you and thank you for that.
Hey, thank you for being on as well. And as I've told you before, I love having you on the show, man. We go back so far, and we always banter with each other, so it's a lot of fun. But guys, thanks again so much for showing up and joining us on the show. We will definitely see you later on this week, and I'm going to dig into some of this recruiting stuff for sure. But make sure you hit that like button on the way out. We will see you on the next one. Where's that thing? Hey, you guys all know the drill, right? Say it with me. Smash that red subscriber button. Like our videos. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss one moment of the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast.